Well, it's coming up to 3 months since the release of the government's Defence Strategic Review. This was a major root and branch review of defence projects, which resulted in 6 being cancelled, 6 more delayed and 21 projects being restructured. We'll look more at this in a moment with Greg Sheridan, who's been quite scathing of the progress being made by the review. He joins me now. First though, Greg, you've argued Australia's support for Ukraine misses the mark. We've committed to send another 30 Bushmasters. I put your criticisms to the Defence Minister on Sunday Agenda, the Deputy PM. Take a listen. Now, Greg Sheridan said about this, he said, quote, "It's a bare minimum you could do." He says, "There's no reason we could not give substantially more Bushmasters to the Ukrainians and simply build more of them in Australia to replace those we donate. But the crazy budgetary restrictions the government has imposed on defence means that's unlikely." What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think people need to just take a step back and look at the commitment that we are making to Ukraine relative to the rest of the world. We are the largest, well, really, with Sweden going into NATO, we will be the largest non-NATO contributor to the support of Ukraine in its war against Russia. That is a fact which is not lost on Europe and certainly not lost on Ukraine, and they are very grateful for that.
Greg Sheridan, what do you make of his response?
Well, look, I like Richard Marsden. It was nice of him not to personalise his response, but it's my job to evaluate him as Defence Minister. But the government is just talking complete baloney there. The figure the government uses, $890 million. To do that, you've got to value that pile of old junk we sent that they said was worth $110 million. You wouldn't get 110 cents for it. You couldn't give it away. They were going to throw the ammunition away, but it would have cost them more to decommission it than just to give it away. And those armoured personnel carriers that were built at the time of the Vietnam War, they valued those at tens of millions of dollars. Then they put a dollar value, which is entirely notional, on the deployment of the Wedgetail to Germany, and deploying the Wedgetail to Germany is not what Ukraine wants. And then they've given 30 Bushmasters. It cost $2 million to make a Bushmaster, but they valued those 30 Bushmasters at $100 million. So I tell you what, their estimate of the value of what they've given to Ukraine is about as reliable as Dan Andrews' estimate of what the Commonwealth Games are going to cost.
Oh, there you go. Who do you from your experience, who do you reckon's behind this? The department, the top brass, or the government? Who would be giving the relevant advice or making the relevant decision?
Well, the Army is completely shattered by the government's decision to cut the infantry fighting vehicles from whatever it was, 450 to 129, and to halve the number of howitzers. I think that's a good decision. But the government has not communicated a new vision for the Army. I think the Army would like to be a miniature US Army. It should be a miniature US Marines. But the whole of the defence budget, the whole of the defence organisation is in a state of absolute crisis at the moment. And what the government is doing is it's saying anything you give to Ukraine has to come out of the defence budget. Now, the defence budget is in complete crisis at the moment, and so is the whole of the defence organisation. We are losing capabilities. We're not gaining any capabilities. We are losing critical capabilities and postponing everything into the never. So naturally the Army doesn't want to give anything away, and the government has apparently decided it's not going to spend a single dollar more on defence. So it could easily decide to build 100 new Bushmasters and give the Ukrainians 100 Bushmasters if it wanted to. We're the 12th or 13th biggest economy in the world. That'd be a sensible thing to do. But instead we're playing these pathetic accounting tricks, which is a symptom of the kind of opacity and obscurantism which surrounds everything to do with defence finance.
All right, speaking of which, you've written this piece smashing up the strategic review today, 3 months on, and you're saying it's a failure.
Yeah, I think it is a complete failure. So the big decisions in the DSR were not to do things, not to buy the final squadron of F-35 Joint Strike Fighters, which we'd always assumed that we would get. No decision yet to put Tomahawks on the air warfare destroyers or on the Collins-class submarines, which had been foreshadowed 1,000 times. Nothing on the surface fleet. So When the government came in, it announced the DSR, and we all said, OK, fair enough, everything goes on hold until the DSR is done, but the DSR is going to give us action. That resulted, by the way, in Defence underspending its budget last year, and that's money it doesn't get back. But instead of the DSR making decisions or recommendations, the government censored the DSR, gave us a very partial view into what it said, and then commissioned more reviews. So we still haven't decided what missiles we're going to make in Australia. We still haven't decided what surface ships we're going to make. So the Albanese government will be more than half over before a single decision is made. But here's the contradiction in the starkest form, Andrew. The government believes these are the most dangerous strategic circumstances we've ever faced since World War II. The government has committed to spend a bucket load of money on nuclear submarines, and you start spending today, you don't get your first nuclear submarine for 10 years, you don't get a fleet of 8 of them until 2050. And the government is not increasing defence by $1. In fact, through a variety of sneaky accounting mechanisms, it's actually decreasing the defence budget. That means the only logical outcome of those three facts simultaneously is that you're reducing defence capability. And so we've got a government telling us this is the most urgent situation we've ever faced, but we're not going to do anything about it for 10 years.
Greg Sheridan, Foreign Editor at The Australian, thanks for your time this afternoon.
Thanks, Andrew.